Video here. All right, we're on. Okay. So we've done, all right, so we've done stick welding. We know that's like the earliest part of welding that started. You know, somebody probably had a battery a long time ago. They had the wires and went, ooh, look at that. You know, the metal welded together. Can we do it on purpose? And that's really probably where it started from. Now, TIG welding is related but a little different. And really where it started is during the Cold War. So if we rewind our mind, for those of you too young to remember, you weren't born, the Cold War, so the Cold War, you know, was this big technological race between the Soviet Union and the United States. It gave us a lot of important things like the space race. And a lot of, as an aside, a lot of modern medicine actually comes out of the space race in the Cold War. A lot of medicine and stuff we know comes out of developments in NASA research for the astronaut program. So it has had a great benefit to our society and worldwide, believe it or not. So during the Cold War, we had some very interesting developments. So as people wanted to go faster, higher, and farther. The space program, you know, they go to the moon. And in aerospace, So in aerospace, we had things like, you know, the X-15 and the most famous one of that era, the Blackbird, the SR-71.
It's still running.
Yes, they're still running. So there was a problem people had with that, which is this material right here. So I'll pass it around. The edges are as cut, so please be careful, okay? The edges are very sharp. This is in fact aerospace. One of my good friends works for Sikorsky. This came out of the aircraft factory at Sikorsky. So this is drops from aircraft making.
This is titanium?
This is titanium. It's an alloy called Ti 6061. I mean Ti 644V. That's a common titanium alloy. So people were making aircraft out of this material, and the problem is you can't stick weld it. They found they were like, okay, we gotta form these aircraft out of this material. In fact, if you look at the Blackbird, the entire plane is titanium, the entire thing.
What's the benefit of this? It feels like it's about the same weight. It's like in between aluminum and...
Yeah, so the benefit of this is that it has much greater strength than aluminum, much higher temperature resistance. So the strength compared to aluminum is like, you know, way up here, much higher strength, much higher heat resistance. You know, aluminum is good, but it's a fairly soft material. And think of the SR-71, okay? Aluminum melts at around depending on the alloy, let's say 750 degrees or so. Now, the temperature of the skin of the SR-71 at flight, that skin would glow red. So it had to be made of a metal that had to function at red heat. You know, the same as like the valves in your engine, you know? The exhaust valves in the engine are like glowing red when that machine is running. So only certain, like Inconel is used for all the exhaust valves and components. All the engine components on the Blackbird are Inconel, another very difficult to weld metal because it's about 70 to 80% pure nickel, the remainder being copper. Both metals are known for being just a really difficult metals to work, cut, and weld. So they had to come up with a new process. So the process they came up with was something that used to go by the name of Heliarc. Has anybody ever heard of that? Yeah, so, and it's actually developed right out of stick welding. So I have my kit here. I'm gonna show you like the most primitive version of that. Like where it started. I really wanna go through the history here because this actually still has relevance today. I still use this. And so you're welcome to try this out yourselves. And our guest tomorrow may use this. A lot of pipe welders still weld TIG this way. Because if you're welding out in the field, you can't this is not gonna survive out on a job site for very long. These machines are nice, but they're very delicate. You know, field construction conditions, drop off the back of a truck, nope. But an old school, you know, tombstone welder, engine welder, which is designed for it, will be fine. So this rig, this was given to me by a friend of mine some years ago. And this consists of some very simple parts. So way back in the beginning of welding, TIG welding, we call it heliarc, because both heliarc and the first they use helium. Now, if you read the chapter or looked through the chapter on TIG welding, you may have noticed that TIG welding, we can use a lot of different gases, which it adds a lot of complication to it. And stick welding, we're not using shielding gas. You know, our choices are what? We can choose a different rod, and that's as far as it goes. TIG welding, we have a lot of choices here. I can choose, like, you know, I can choose a certain kind of tungsten from dozens of tungstens. I can choose a shielding gas from dozens of different shielding gases. You know, different filler wire, yeah?
I thought it was only like three common gases that they use.
Yeah, well, the common gas would be argon, okay? Well, CO2, well, for TIG welding, we can't use CO2. You can only use noble gases, which would be any of the ones all the way on the right side of the periodic table, which would be argon, argon, xenon, krypton, well, hydrogen's in there too. Oxygen sometimes, so the gases are complicated. Shielding gases in TIG welding, for example, I've got a mix at home called Trimix, which is specifically gives you like the very, very best stainless steel welding you can possibly buy. It's what they call a B tank. You know the little tanks about this, a 60 pounder, they call them B tanks? That cost me $140 to fill. Whereas for argon, it's about anywhere from $40 to say $50 for argon. $120, $140 depending on the economics. That gas consists of our mixture of argon, helium, and I think a little bit of oxygen, I believe. It's a little weird, like, ooh, why oxygen? I mean, I thought oxygen is the enemy here. Well, yes and no. This is where the chemistry of welding gets to be really kind of complicated. I do have a video about the shielding gases, which I can post. It's well over an hour. It's very deep and scientific, but shielding gases gets complicated because we have to remember that when we're looking at the plasma arc, which we'll see in a few minutes, the plasma arc is the temperature of the surface of the sun. At 10,000 degrees, strange things happen. Gases, they break apart into their individual component elements. That's why I gave you the periodic table. So stuff like CO2 actually breaks apart to free carbon and free oxygen. Other gases will break apart if they're made from several different atoms. Those are going to break apart into their component elements, and they're going to recombine in sometimes very beneficial ways. Like CO2, the additional carbon helps prevent carbon being leached out of the metal, which otherwise can be burned away. Oxygen combines with other free elements, removing them from the metal, like cleaning it, because oxygen oxidizes stuff, pulls them out. Other gases can be added for making the arc more stable, making it hotter, for instance. So there's a lot of these things that as a welder, you can custom tune these things for your advantage. So learning these things can be very beneficial. Like, hey, I've got a different weld to do, but if I use the right kind of filler wire, the right kind of gas, I can get these really cool effects that maybe this other person doesn't know. And I got the job and this person doesn't have the job, you see? So, but you gotta do your studying, you gotta read up on this stuff. A lot of TIG welding is just like racing, you know? How much you wanna do, a lot of it depends on how much money you got. It can get very expensive. But in the end, if you're able to do let's say if you're able to do, because you're spending a little money, now you can do $1,000 job that takes you 10 minutes, it's money well spent, right? So there are things you have to weigh about that. In my case, I've done side jobs where I had to spend a lot of money on just the bits and pieces, but in the end, I got a really lucrative side job done and a customer who came back to me later with another one. You know, if they say, hey, this person did the impossible, they're going to come back to you. And you're going to get repeats, and that's worth more than just a single shot, you know. So here, this rig right here, composed of some simple parts. So that's a regulator. So a regulator regulates the gas that you're going to be welding with. So the regulator has two stages. This stage here, this shows you your bottle pressure. So on this, the lower gauge, when I turn it on right here, it's now reading 500 pounds, which is kind of on the low end. So just for reference, if you notice your gas is about 500, let us know, because below about 500, your gas delivery can get kind of iffy. It's almost like driving with your gas tank on E. You know, you don't know how much you got left.
What is it supposed to be around?
A full bottle, good question, a full bottle will be anywhere between 1,500 and 2,000. That's a full bottle is up here. And the second gauge, this one is called cubic feet per hour. So this is going to be how many feet of gas you're going to be, cubic feet. So if you imagine a cube, 12 by 12 by 12, of gas per hour that you're pumping out when you're welding. So if a standard measure might be anywhere between 15 to 25 cubic feet per hour, that's how much gas you're using, all right? That can be kind of a bit, so something you want to worry about, because you're paying for this. So using the least gas possible is very important. We want to be conservative about that, because if you have to pay for it yourself, it can really suck. And I've run out of gas like on a Saturday morning and been like, okay, nobody's open. Where I do know some places are open, but still, it's like, what are you going to do? So you want to be very conservative about that. And here especially, we want to be very aware of that. Watch your gas. If you're not welding, shut it off. If you gotta go to the bathroom, get some water, shut off your gas, double check you shut off your gas. Because people have left it on, and by the next morning, the whole tank is gone. So let's be careful about that. So it's a two-stage regulator. First stage is a ball pressure. Second stage, we can set this with this knob over here to what we need. And on this regulator here, this says argon or argon CO2. This side says helium. So you want to know which gas you're setting it to. Set it to the correct gas. Other regulators may have different gases. And there's a regulator for each gas. Like oxygen uses a different kind of regulator. Okay? This one is argon helium. Acetylene uses a different kind of regulator. And you don't want to mix these up. The threads are actually done so they can't intermix, but you want to be sure about that. Only use the right gas, right regulator. Never ever oil these things. Doesn't matter how squeaky they are. Never ever oil it. You got that? Because if you oil an oxygen regulator and you hit it with 100% pure argon or oxygen, what's going to happen? It's going to go boom. So you never ever want to get these two mixed up. 100% argon, 100% oxygen will ignite any material capable of burning. Your clothes, anything that can burn will burn, and burn very aggressively. So we want to be careful about that. So that's a regulator. The next thing is our torch. So the biggest distinctive feature of TIG welding is our torch. So this is a heavy duty torch. I really like this one. This is a Weldcraft. The cool thing about TIG welding is you can customize this to you. So with stick welding, you've got that thing, and it's like, all right, that's that. But TIG welding, I can customize the entire torch to exactly what I want. So I can customize the angle of the torch. It can be straight, 45, 60, 15 degrees, anything I want. The size of the back part of the torch, the size of the nozzle. I can customize the grip on this thing. I can have a button on here. I could have a roller switch. Lots of different things. You can customize it kind of like racing, where a race car is customized to the driver. You can customize the torch exactly to your needs specifically, which is a really great advantage because it'll fit your hand. You want it to fit your hand like a glove. Totally like an instrument, okay? Like an instrument, because it is. Yeah, you want it to fit just right. If it's too heavy, it's like, you want it to fit just right. So this is a heavy duty torch. Here are the parts. So this part is called the nozzle right here, and the nozzle is going to be usually ceramic. It can be this pink ceramic. It could be a white ceramic like this kind of nozzle. Or ones I like a lot, it can be Pyrex glass, like this. So the nozzle is going to contain our shielding gases. Like a nozzle on the garden hose. The size of the opening is going to shape the stream of gas coming out of here. So if we have a little tiny hole, we get a little tiny stream of gas. We have a really big one, we get a really big stream of gas. And big stream of gas uses more gas. So these are things you have to kind of weigh, you know, and think about. So underneath the nozzle, I unscrew this. These are all consumables, by the way, so these do wear out. So as we're using them, they will loosen, they will wear out. So if you're like, oh man, this is falling apart, it's my fault. No, they're supposed to do that. All these parts are consumables, all right? All these wear out, and that's why I got a box like this. Now Hunter has a box like this, but his is like a fishing tackle box. He's got a huge suitcase of TIG parts. His is enormous. You know, he doesn't have kids, so he can afford that stuff. So these get pricey, by the way. Like 3 of these things is like $50. Yeah, it gets expensive.
How long do they normally last?
If you're real careful, indefinitely, but it is glass. So if you tap it on the table, crack, it gets really hot. It's kind of like taking a really hot glass like baking dish and putting it on a cold counter. It's like, oh. So you do have to be careful. So inside of here, the next part we have in here is this part, which is called a diffuser. Right here, diffuser. Diffuser has little holes. Everybody see those right there? Little tiny holes in it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, see them? So the diffuser's job is to diffuse the gas. It goes to the hose and it shoots out of these holes kind of like a sprinkler. Shoots out the nozzle. The next part is this, which is called a collet. The collet inside of here is going to, when you screw it down, this is the part that grabs onto the tungsten itself, holds it in place. These do wear out. They're made of copper alloy. They do wear out. So if you're welding and it doesn't tighten up and your tungsten keeps falling out, we gotta get a new one. But they last a pretty long time. But they're heat sensitive, so as a student, we want to mind our heat. If you're a real cowboy on the heat, you're going to melt these things. And remember, always keep in mind, what if you have to foot the bill, okay? It gets expensive. So we want to take care of our equipment because something like this torch body here is probably $200 or $300 right here. So we want to take care of these things. So the torch body itself, this is the body of it right here. And its job is to hold the parts, this out of here. And it has a gas line going into it. So the gas line is going to go, the gas and power both go through this hose. And that gas is going to cool our torch, and it's going to shield our welding. So it has 2 jobs here. So this is called an air-cooled torch. And air-cooled torches are good up to 150 amps, okay? Beyond 150 amps, we want to use what's called a water-cooled torch, which will have a separate machine, which is kind of like a radiator on the car, you know? And it pumps, there's 2 lines going in, pumps liquid in, cools the torch, and pumps the liquid out. We don't have those here. And do I need one? No. I don't have one for my home rig. I mean, unless you're cranking like really heavy 200 amp jobs all day long, you really don't need that. Now the torch is going to get hot. So as you're welding with your nice thin TIG gloves, and you're like, ooh, that's getting toasty, hey, maybe that's a sign you should put the torch down and let it cool for a little while. So we do want to keep that in mind. So going back to duty cycle, it's not just the machine, but you do have to give it a break. When it gets really hot, let the thing cool down a bit because it's overheating and you're gonna burn your fingers and it really sucks. It gets real hot real fast. And you'll be like, and you look down and your hands are all red, so take care of it. This torch has a gas valve on here, so the torches we have in here, with the exception of the Miller, are going to have a separate gas nozzle. So once you turn on your regulator, your gas is on, and then you're going to open your nozzle to allow your gas to come out. So again, make sure this is shut off when you're done welding or you're taking a break. Turn off your gas as a rule, you know? Always turn the gas off when you're not welding. We want to save gas because it's expensive, and when we run a tank out, it sucks to be the person here on the welder with no gas. Because now what are you doing, you know? So let's take care of it. So this is an air-cooled rig, and this is like an early example of what was available to people a long time ago. This is a recent thing. These kind of welders were not around when I was welding. We had big, you know, giant boxes, an inverter. It used the same kind of power that makes all of our personal computers, tablets, and phones possible. Super miniaturization and an inverter power supply. What that means is it's able to take alternating current coming through the walls and electronically convert it to direct current so we can weld with it. Very powerful thing. And it makes welders affordable, which is also really good. So I'm gonna hook this up to this machine right here and show you what really old welding is like. So if somebody could plug this into the wall, it would be fantastic. On the socket over there. See if you can reach it there. Great, thank you so much.
Be careful, Alex.
Here, we have I'm going to pause on this thing and we'll set up and we'll be right back.